So, Mike, why don't we start with the newest 2022 offer that went out there, and that's defensive end Darren Agu out of Georgia, originally from England. And this is one you actually saw a couple weeks ago at a camp. You saw Agu play before Notre Dame extended the offer, and then when it did, a couple days later, you threw a future cast in for him to land at Notre Dame. Why don't you take us through kind of how this came together from offering, what you thought, and what led you to put that future cast in?
Yeah, it was actually like maybe 12 hours after he got the offer, I put in that pick. Um, Agu landed the offer from Notre Dame on April Fool's Day, and he thought it was a joke at first. Like he was so excited about picking up the Notre Dame offer. Just hearing really good things about where the Fighting Irish are at, and that recruitment felt comfortable enough to put that prediction in. I don't take those predictions lightly. The thing I least like doing in this industry is putting in a prediction, just have to change it. That just boils my blood when I have to do that. So this one, I don't feel like I'm going to change it. I feel like Agu is leaning strongly towards Notre Dame. The same day he picked up that Notre Dame offer, Nick Saban called, and Agu picked up an offer from Alabama. So folks that are just looking at the rivals page and seeing a 3-star and here's another 3-star. Well, one, it's Mike Elston. Mike Elston can pretty much do whatever, in my opinion, he can do whatever the heck he wants. I mean, and I would trust him. Mike Elston's doing a phenomenal job. However you want to look at it, unless you can play devil's advocate, Patrick, and give me a counter argument. He's putting dudes in the NFL. He's taking developmental guys. He's taking 5-star guys. I mean, heck, Dalen Hayes was a 5-star guy, and he had a fine career. Then you look at Ade Ogundeji, a 3-star developmental Western Michigan flip, and they had similar production. So Mike Elston, whatever he wants to do is fine by me to begin with. But then if you look at, okay, Darren Agu is 6'6", 230. I clocked him at a hand time running a 4.75 at this VTO camp in Atlanta in late March. And oh yeah, he picked up Alabama. So Alabama actually offered before Notre Dame did by a few hours. So Agu checks all the boxes for me from the personality standpoint. Him as a football player, I love that he's from across the pond. Just kind of everything. I would think this would be a really good pickup for Notre Dame.
Yeah, this one's really interesting in that you look at the defensive line board and you think it's one, busy, and two, Notre Dame was in a pretty good spot with some of these guys, as we had discussed on recent pods and as what you had reported. I mean, you already have two defensive ends in the class, and Tyson Ford and Aiden Gobira, one of them playing in that Viper role, one of them looking like a strong side end. You have a future cast in for DJ Wesolak, the 4-star pass rusher out of Missouri. So that's three defensive ends right there that Mike, it's either in the class or you have a future cast in for them to land in the class, not including Agu. And that's not even covering defensive tackle, where I know you've said in here before, if you think Notre Dame wants Donovan Heinisch and continues to push for him, he will end up in the class. You've said Notre Dame is in a very good spots with Anthony Lucas, the 4-star out of Arizona, and Caleb Artis, the 4-star out of the New York City area. So you kind of looked at this, and even before this offer, all right, Notre Dame's in a pretty good spot, and how many linemen are they going to take after taking 4 last cycle? And then you put this offer in here that it was one that obviously resonated. So I don't know. It's just kind of a fascinating thing of, all right, they're just not slowing down at a position where it looked like they were going to end up in a pretty good spot if they wanted to take 4, which was interesting and a little surprising in and of itself. And then you add another one to the mix. So plenty to keep following here, and kind of gives you all the more confidence, I guess, that Notre Dame's going to end up with, I don't know, what, 3 or 4 defensive ends and 4 or 5 linemen. Stuff I don't think we would have predicted a year ago or even 6 months ago in this class.
Yeah, I probably sound like a broken record about this when it comes to Notre Dame defensive recruiting in general. Is the good problem to have. Notre Dame is probably going to have to turn away some good defensive linemen. And then you look at linebackers. We're not going to dive into linebacker recruiting in today's show, but I think someone like Langston Patterson was a guy the staff really liked, a linebacker from Nashville. He picked Clark Lee and Vanderbilt a couple weeks ago. That's probably someone Notre Dame cooled on because they just had too many other good targets that they were after. So they're going to have the turn away guys, which is always a better thing to do than have to, beg guys that you don't like as much to come into the class. So, as far as what's going to happen, obviously I don't have the answer right now of who's going to commit. If visits do open up, does Tyson Ford or Aiden Gobira, the current end commits, do they go visit elsewhere? You just, these recruiting is always unpredictable. But if Agu does commit, there's 3 defensive ends. You mentioned with Ford and Gobira, one's strong side, one's a weak side. I think that's maybe the projection right now, that Ford, who's 6'6", 260, is a strong side end, and Gobira, who's about 6'6", 230-ish, is a weak side guy. We see this with defensive line all the time. Guys just eat their way into sliding inside. So, maybe Ford goes from a 5 to a 3 technique, and Gobira goes from a weak side end to a strong side end, and who knows, could he be inside guy as well? But then you look at, the Marcus Freeman defense in that big end position, that kind of opens the door for some possibilities. But, who knows how long Marcus Freeman's going to be around at Notre Dame to actually coach these guys when they're junior, senior seasons. But that's a different discussion for a different day. But you mentioned Donovan Heinisch. That is certainly one player that I feel very good about Notre Dame landing as well. So Ford, Gobira in the class. Agu I feel really good about. Heinisch I feel really good about. Well, there's 3 ends and an interior player. Well, where does that leave guys like DJ Wesolak, Teva Tafidi, the 4-star rush end, who I feel like I'm pretty sure everyone in this industry is already, at least in the Notre Dame market, has put in a pick for him to land at Notre Dame. I haven't, because I'm just like, I don't know if he's going to have a spot. I just don't know, with how his timeline is looking. Cyrus Moss, the top 100 defensive end from Las Vegas. Ernest Cooper, another defensive end prospect who Notre Dame really likes from Arlington, Texas. Martin. Anthony Lucas, 6'5", 285-pounder, who I feel like is that big end, like Myron Tagovailoa most has been playing this spring, or a 3 technique. There's just so many guys still left on the board. What Notre Dame does here, we'll see. But I still feel good about those 4. Again, Ford and Gobira, who are committed, and then Heinisch and Agu. Does Notre Dame take a 5th? Do they have to turn down some guys? That's certainly kind of the storyline for Notre Dame defensive line recruiting right now, Patrick.
Yeah, and that's what made that Agu offer interesting, when you just look at the raw numbers of targets still out there and where Notre Dame stands with them, where, yeah, they're realistically in the top group, and by top group, I don't mean top 10 or anything like that, like
top 3,
meaningful top 3 or something like that. And like we discussed on our ideal class show, like guys who Notre Dame has a plausible path to landing, or the path for said player to end up at Notre Dame is not one that makes you go like, oh yeah, that's never impossibly whatever going to happen. But I don't know. It was interesting to see the Agu offer go out, about a week or so after DJ Wesolak picked up an offer from Alabama. Do you read anything into that at all, or is it just kind of a coincidental thing?
I don't know. I feel like on any time a question starts with, do you read anything into this? I'm probably too heavily conservative and like, no, I just don't. Like, that's just me, though. I also don't in this situation. I think it's more of a bird in the hand situation. If you really like Agu and you feel like he could pop soon, you have no guarantees that DJ Wesolak, even if DJ Wesolak is calling Marcus Freeman every day saying, hey, I'm coming, like, all right, well, why aren't you putting anything out then? I'm not saying that's just an example, folks. Don't read anything into that. Yeah, you just don't know. So if you do have something certain, and these are comparable players, in this case, maybe Darren Agu with Wesolak and Safidi, like these are all really strong Viper candidates for you. And you have that one's in now, like, and you like them fairly equally. you just kind of have to weigh that out. And that's at least my read, kind of my opinion on the situation. And I always say recruiting is just not black and white. It is not as simple as I think some people would like to make it out to be. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's very layered and complex, and just factors in the recruiting process that you would just never even think of, to be involved in a recruiting process.
Yeah, and that's why I think that even though it might have been unexpected for Notre Dame to offer another defensive lineman, given the status of where that position's recruiting stood, I don't know that it was necessarily something you can call the wrong decision. Because I don't think they would have done this if it was just a kid they wouldn't have seriously considered taking if it's a bird in the hand situation or a thing where it's an either or between two guys or three guys or what have you, or someone who they thought, oh yeah, we can grab this guy in December because we're going to be his best offer or whatever. Yeah, I don't think they would have done this if this wasn't someone they seriously, legitimately liked and would be okay with it hopping in the class if he called them today and said, I want in.
Yeah, no, they definitely really like Darren Agu. One other defensive end I have a future cast picking for Notre Dame to land is Alex Bauman, the brother of tight end, or Irish tight end, Kevin Bauman. I have a pick in for him. I put that in last November, right after Notre Dame offered, and Notre Dame's still recruiting him. He's a good-looking defensive end and tight end like his brother was at Red Bank Catholic in New Jersey. I mean, does Notre Dame have room for another defensive end, or he could play tight end at the next level? Well, Notre Dame's got a numbers crunch at tight end too, so um, I don't know what they're going to end up doing. Come December signing day, I don't think the Notre Dame staff knows what that will look like in 8 months, but I think at the end of the day, you can make a good assumption of they're going to sign another really good defensive line class.
I think that's pretty clear and only increases here with the Agu offer.